Welcome, everyone, to the Stinking Albatross podcast. My name is Alyssa Gallobe, and I'm here with my partner and co-host, Scott Hayward.
Hey, everybody.
And this is the first time we've ever done a podcast. And for those of you who don't know, we do run an organization called Right Now. It's a political pro-life organization, but this podcast will be about every and all issues political, regardless of whether they are about life issues or not, but we are going to talk about them from a social conservative perspective. We also called it the Stinking Albatross. Thank you, Peter MacKay, because of the last leadership race. He said that social conservative issues were the reason why Andrew Scheer lost the election, and said that it was a stinking albatross around his neck. Scott, do you know the origin of the stinking albatross, perchance?
Yeah, it's from some sort of I think it's called the Mariner story or the Mariner's Hymn or something like that. It's an old story from many centuries back, and it's a lore about a fisherman who basically had bad luck because an albatross would be around his neck, and I think an albatross at sea, I could be wrong on this, is known as bad luck. So I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah. So it was the rhyme of the ancient mariner.
Thank you.
I'm prepared. And yeah, an albatross followed the ship, and it was a sign of good luck. But the mariner, the sailor, shoots the albatross with a crossbow, and that act curses the ship. And then they tie the albatross around his neck to let the other sailors know that he was the reason for their bad luck. So
I wasn't too far off. That's about a 5 out of 10 right there.
Do you know anything about albatrosses? Any fun facts?
I know that is a 3 under par in golf, and I think I've only got one in my life. So that's about as much as I know about albatrosses.
Okay, well, they mate for life, like us. Well, a certain percentage of the population, and they court each other with elaborate mating dances, which is how I got my husband. I'm not sure about you, but
I did not get my husband that way. No.
That's good to know. You'll have to tell us that story later then. So basically, Scott and I met, how long ago was it? In 2014, 2013?
Yeah, you know what? I actually had a 9-year anniversary being on Twitter. And because you forced me on Twitter in early June of 2013. So
I did.
It's been 9 years.
Okay. So the Twitter anniversary and our friendship anniversary is the same.
Pretty much.
To know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we met each other in 20.
Sure. I actually don't know. I have to look it up. I don't tweet at myself, so.
Producer Dave was just talking to us.
Yeah,
and
he wants
us to say our Twitter handles.
Yeah. Let me look it up.
Scott's is at Scott M. Hayward, and mine is at Alyssa Glow.
There we go. And we have a Right Now one too, right?
At Right Now HQ, yeah.
That's right.
So Scott and I met in 2013. He was helping a pro-life organization in Manitoba. They brought me out to speak at an event, a dinner, I believe, and I was coming off of like a whirlwind tour. I think I had spoken at many different places, and I had just helped organize the March for Life in Ottawa, and I was exhausted. I was wearing this big oversized hoodie and these leggings and flip-flops, which broke on the way in the plane on the way over, and I get to Manitoba and they lost my luggage, and I had to speak that evening, so I had nothing to wear. I had half a broken shoe and half and a full shoe, so I went to the lady's house who was hosting me. She gave me her like orthopedic sandals to wear, and I did the speech like that, and in all the pictures I basically look homeless, but that we developed a friendship ever since then. And I convinced Scott to actually leave his job. Well, I helped convince him. Just accounting was the other half, I guess. But to leave his job as an accountant and come work for the pro-life movement.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, that's accurate. Roughly? Yeah, because we met in 2013, right after the end of tax season, which for other CPAs out there is not a fun time. And I had been in a public practice, not even quite for a year at that point, and I was not really enjoying it. It really wasn't for me. It wasn't what I thought it would be. It wasn't a good fit. I think my old firm could probably confirm that. That's nothing against the people at the old firm. I quite liked my colleagues, but I just it wasn't feeling it. And yeah, it's quite providential when we met, particularly in my life. I obviously wasn't married at the time. Was looking for a career change, like a massive career change, mind you. And yeah, a couple years later, once I got my designation as a chartered professional accountant, that's when I made the big move.
Yeah, and so then we worked together at another pro life organization, and then in 2016 we left that organization in a rather dramatic fashion to start a new political pro life organization that was solely focused on nominating and electing pro life candidates, and we had pretty big success right away, which kind of put us on the map. We were involved in Sam Osterhoff's nomination in what's the riding, Norfolk, or no,
No,
sorry,
no, Niagara West. Back
Niagara
then,
West.
it was known as Niagara West Glanbrook, and now it's just
Right.
Niagara West. Yeah.
I have like Leslie Lewis on the mind. So,
Yeah.
and then we were involved in Andrew Scheer's leadership race, which was also quite exciting. And then we've been involved in nominations and elections ever since. But, with COVID hitting, we thought it would be a great idea to hop on this podcast bandwagon and communicate with our supporters and our non-supporters directly and let them know where we stand on things and kind of give a different perspective, because we think that's drastically missing in Canadian politics. You have a lot of American independent media, you have a lot of American podcasts, but you don't really have too many Canadian podcasts that talk about politics from a social conservative perspective. And we both love podcasts. I mean, Scott got me into the Hurly Burly. Shout out to them. And the Curse of Politics, and I love the Babylon Bee. It's one of my favorites when I'm just like need a laugh. If you haven't heard of that, check it out. The fake news is really funny, sort of Norm Macdonald style from Saturday Night Live. But we both listen to podcasts. I mean, even when we traveled across the country doing speaking tours, Scott and I would just binge listen to Dan and Jay's podcast from Sportsnet, Sports Center, Sportsnet.
TSN Sports Center.
TSN Sports Center.
Yeah. Sportsnet's the rival, but whatever.
Okay. Rip to Dan and Jay, but Dan has his own podcast. Anyway, so we're going to talk about a few different things on this particular podcast, and hopefully in the future we'll have guests, we'll have other interesting pieces like that don't have anything to do with politics, stories, things we like, things we don't like. Just stay tuned, and hopefully you're entertained, and you can sort of understand where social conservatives in Canada are coming from. Today's podcast was sponsored by LaRosse Media, so check them out. They do videos and documentaries, all sorts of media work, so please check them out at larossemedia.com. Thank you so much for your sponsorship, and thanks to producer Dave for doing an amazing job on this podcast. So the first thing I think we should talk about, since I already brought it up, is the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. The deadline to sell memberships was just this past Friday, so only a few days ago. And it seems to be record-breaking, but we don't know for sure yet. Different campaigns are saying really big numbers, which haven't been confirmed. But Robert Batherson, president of the Conservative Party, has said that it will be record-breaking. What do you think? Do you think that's the case, Scott? Do you think that the numbers... I mean, Poilievre's campaign is boasting over 300,000 new memberships. Brown's saying 150,000. Where are you on the membership sales right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting because in the last leadership race in 2020, that was record breaking. I think they had something like 269,000 or so members of the party who were eligible to vote in that leadership race. And then the previous one, I believe, was record breaking as well. I think it was around 150 or 170,000. So why wouldn't 2022 be record breaking? I think the candidates running in this leadership race, I would say, are more generally, it's a more interesting slate than it was in 2020 and in 2017. I think you have more ideological differences. We're coming up close to 10 years that the Liberal government, or the Liberal Party, pardon me, has been in government, has been in power in Canada. They'll be in power for 10 years as of 2025. And with the Liberal NDP coalition, or whatever that thing is supposed to be, that runs out at the end of 2025 or sometime in 2025. So there's your 10 years. So I think people are really plugged in. Now, we have friends in all the different camps. Having done this now, Alyssa, for what you said, we started in 2016, so 6.5 years. That's we should have friends in all the different camps, and kind of talking to them, behind the scenes, off the record, and stuff like that. Like, it sounds like the party membership scroll, from what I can tell, and I think they announced today that they're not going to release that official number till July 29th. I'm sure that the different camps will know sooner, because God willing, they should get the final list much sooner than that. Hopefully it doesn't take them 8 weeks to process the list. That would really suck if different campaigns got the list July 29th, and as of like August 3rd, people are receiving their ballots in the mail. That gives no time to have an actual discussion. But anyway, so the list is supposed to, or the numbers just going to be released publicly on July 29th. I've heard 600,000. That seems reasonable to me. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. But if you look at and hear the different camps and the numbers they're putting out, so Poliver's putting out 300,000, Patrick Brown's putting 150. I've heard, I don't know if any of these numbers are true or not, by the way. So just big disclaimer there. They heard 90,000 from the Shrey camp. Baber's camp is boasting some big numbers. I'm sure Leslyn Lewis sold more than she did last time, and I'm sure Scott Aitchison sold a few memberships there. Plus, you're going to have people that just joined the party kind of randomly. So if you put all these numbers together, it comes out to about 800, almost 900,000. So if the actual number is 600,000, someone's lying by 200,000, and it can't just be all Patrick Brown, because then he's negative 50,000.
Yeah.
So this is not an atypical thing to happen, where you have like the different leadership camps that are taking the most perhaps liberal interpretation of how many memberships they sold. When Patrick Brown's people released on, I think it was Thursday evening, that they had sold 150,000. In my mind, I thought, okay, Poliver's camp is going to say around 300,000, and that's exactly what happened. So, it makes me question, what is the truth? One last thing I'll say about this is that the party is super far behind on processing a lot of memberships, because for whatever reason, Conservative Fund Canada, which is the board of directors that actually governs how money is spent in the Conservative Party of Canada, they won't spend the money to hire people to process memberships, which doesn't make any sense, but that's not atypical for the Conservative Party of Canada to make such, stupefying decisions. Cuts. Yeah, we're going to start with the party first. So anyway, the different camps said, okay, like, if we're not going to get this list to July 29th, which is just ridiculous, because like we're going to get it 5 days before ballots hit people's mailboxes, maybe every week you can give us an updated list for all the people that you have in fact processed. And 5 of the 6 camps were for that. There was one camp that wasn't for that. That's the Pierre Poliver camp. So, how much, like, did they actually sell 300,000? Because that would be pretty determinative within the first couple of weeks as, the various interim lists get released. So I don't know what happened for sure with the membership numbers, but in a long about way to answer your question, yeah, I do think it broke a record. And I'm hearing the number 600,000, but who knows what the truth is? We won't know probably till the end of July.
Yeah, and I mean, and besides memberships, we do have like Charest saying that he's going to win all the 78 ridings in Quebec, and he has the points to win the leadership race, and everyone's boasting about this. And what I find interesting, I mean, just talking a little bit more about the candidates, is that from my perspective, Patrick Brown, for example, he is solely in the race to be a huge pain in the ass to Polyev. I don't think he actually wants to win the leadership race. He just is in attack mode and will jump on anything that he does in error, Polyev, and isn't really addressing any other candidates. So that's where I see Polyev coming from. Scott Aitchison, I think, he just wants to be like all the other candidates who were lesser known and just raise his profile. Roman Babers, about COVID-19, that's his main thing. We did know him prior to the leadership race, and it's what he rose to fame for. It's what people like him for, despite ideological issues and differences on many other points. Like, social conservatives really like him despite him not being a social conservative at all, because of the his COVID stances. So where do you see this leadership race going? Is it a coronation for Polyev? If he does, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people in a room in Calgary and Edmonton and different parts of Canada, does that equal 300,000? I mean, from a social conservative perspective, we obviously love Leslie Lewis. She's our number one. We want her to win. We think she, despite, aside from the social conservative issues, she's just a winner and a breath of fresh air in general. But are we, is that even a possibility? Do you think that we're just kind of have our heads in the clouds and it's going to be a Polyev coronation? Or, from a social conservative perspective and also from a winning perspective, what are your thoughts on the conservative race?
Well, it really depends on the numbers, right? Like, so
Yeah.
did he sell 300,000 memberships, and are there, a total of 800,000 memberships or 900,000 memberships? Because if he sold 300,000 memberships, but there's, 850 or 900,000 members, that's great for Polliver in a race of where there's 6 people, but it's by any stretch of the means winning on the first ballot. Did he sell 300,000 memberships and there's 600,000 memberships? If that's the case, then yeah, like he has a really good chance of winning. The other thing too is like how solid are those memberships that he sold? So let's assume that the 300,000 number is true, right? If that's the case, I can tell you, like, from my experience in the last month of May, and filming this, we're at the beginning of June here on D-Day. So through the entire month of May, I was basically on the road. I went to Ottawa for the Manning Center conference, or pardon me, the Canada Strong and Free, I believe, conference. They had a debate there. It was an unofficial party debate, but they had a leaders debate there. I went to the March for Life in Ottawa. I went to the March for Life in Toronto. Our colleague Gabby, who is replacing Alyssa while she's on mat leave, she did a number of presentations in Atlantic Canada and in British Columbia. I did them in Southern Ontario. So between her and I, we were chatting. We were talking to people on the ground. I was talking, obviously, a lot of pro-lifers. I was also talking with a lot of non-pro-lifers, especially in Ottawa. People who are very like Ottawaized. Like they're very much in the bubble in Ottawa. People who take an interest in politics but don't necessarily live in Ottawa, or who were once involved in politics. And I noticed, and I don't know about you, Alyssa, because obviously you were busy in May giving birth to your second child. But I noticed starting at the Manning Center conference that going in that room by there was no debating that Pierre Poilievre had the largest number of supporters in that room for that debate at Canada Strong and Free. But it wasn't as pro-Pierre as I thought it would be. And speaking to a lot of non-pro-lifers, which I really tried to do at that conference, who were at that debate, I kind of asked them, like, what are your thoughts of the debate or whatever. And I remember a lot of them saying that they found Pierre, at least in debate mode, to be a little bit underwhelming. Really only want to talk about one or two issues, being inflation and deficit financing to a certain extent. Almost punching down to Charest. There was one point of the debate, and I think a lot of people will remember this, who had watched or seen clips, that Poilievre was going after Charest because Charest did some contract work for Huawei, which is a company from China connected with the Chinese communists. And they've been banned from competing for Canada's 5G network for a lot of our allies around the world. And so this is somewhat of an issue within the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race. And so Poilievre was going after Jean Charest, how much did you get from that contract with Huawei? How much? And he was pressing him, kind of interrupting him constantly. And at the beginning of that exchange, because I was in the room with like the other 500 or 1,000 people there, at the beginning, people were kind of chuckling or whatever, like, oh, haha, classic Pierre, because this is something that he does, in committee and sometimes in the House of Commons when it's committee in whole or in question period. But by 7 or 10 seconds in, when he kept doing this, people started booing. And they're not booing Poilievre, even though they probably agreed with Poilievre on the point. They were booing Poilievre because of the way he was conducting himself. And so this was just something I heard throughout the rest of the month of May, and I felt that there was a softness, and you saw that in numbers from Abacus data, where Pierre Poilievre went from a plus 43 to a plus 28 approval rating amongst Conservative voters. I mean, that's still a huge rating, but that's a 15-point drop. That's well outside the margin of error. So, do I think he has it sewed up? No, because even if he did sell 300,000 memberships and there's 600,000 memberships out there, it does seem, to me at least, from on the ground talking to people, and a little bit of the data that's starting to come in that that vote is soft. And so we'll have to see what the trajectory is going out through the month of June and the month of July into August when people start sending their ballots in. I don't know what you think,
Yeah.
Alyssa. I don't know what you found or talking to people. Kind of, how do you think? What do you think on that question? Like, do you think it's a foregone conclusion that it's a Pulliver coronation, or what are you feeling?
It's hard to say, but I also think that, one of the things that I dislike about him that I think people don't notice too much is that he is one of the only, if not the only, uh, leadership candidate to not take questions at his events.
Right.
And he's also very squeamish and doesn't take too many. He didn't take any questions after the debate, the only formal debate the Conservative Party held, while the others did. And it's because obviously he wants to remain on message, but how long can you do that if you're a prime minister? You're going to have to address voters, you're going to have to address the media at some point with questions that you don't want to answer. And we don't really know how he responds to those because he runs away every time that's the case. And, you go to a Leslie Lewis event and it's like a 15-minute speech and then an hour of questions.
Yep.
You go to a charade event or you watch it, also tons of questions. A Baber event, tons of questions. And then Pierre goes in, applause, cheering, does his thing that he does best, and then takes pictures, but he doesn't take any questions. And
Not
so
publicly,
to
at least,
me,
right? Like, people will
yeah,
line up, they'll take a picture with him, they'll ask a question,
exactly.
but that'll be it. There's no cameras there, so there's no moment of vulnerability. Everything's very tightly
Yeah.
controlled. It's very, very Harper-esque, right? This is something that
Hmm.
Stephen Harper did. So for people who are watching this podcast or listening to it, which is hopefully, more than you and
You're
I.
the five people,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They might not like me saying this, but this is something that actually Justin Trudeau was really good at in his leadership race in 2013 for the Liberal Party. And then for the year and a half after that, leading to the 2015 federal election, he would go out and he would do town halls, and he'd be in the middle and it'd be
Yeah.
like in a school gym, and there's like maybe a few hundred or 1,000 people there. And like, to his credit, he would take questions from basically everyone in those town halls, and some of them weren't friendly questions. Now, I don't think he's the best at answering questions. I think someone like Leslie Lewis or Jean Charest are really good at that, having seen them in this leadership race. But it was a criticism of Stephen Harper, and I think that the Trudeau people purposely did that to show the difference between Justin Trudeau and Stephen Harper, to kind of highlight that Harper was closed
Yeah.
and tightly scripted, and not really a man of the people. Well, Justin Trudeau, he's with the rolled up sleeves and no jacket, no tie,
Yeah.
taking questions from the people. And I think that this is a potential vulnerability, and not in a good way for Pierre Poilievre. So I noticed that it's a lot, and which makes sense because there's a lot of Harper people on his campaign, that this is a
Yeah.
very kind of 2011 style campaign, which may not work for the leadership race. But like you said, Alyssa, like, in a 36-day federal election campaign, I don't know, and I don't think they can get away with that, even if
Yeah.
it's kind of sort of like a change election.
Yeah. And, authenticity is a big thing. And that's why people, I think, are attracted to certain candidates that aren't as polished right now and maybe are lesser so to the ones that are the Harper-esque ones who have everything rehearsed, their lines, and, don't really speak off the cuff or from their perspective on certain things solely. So authenticity, switching topics, was a big factor, I think, in the Ontario provincial election. A lot of people say that Doug Ford's the type of guy you want to have a beer with, and
Yep.
they thought that he was like a one-trick pony, beating Kathleen Wynne, but he proved to do even better this time around in the Ontario provincial election. But it's really I'm torn about. I'm from Ontario, and now I live in Alberta, so I'm more tapped into Alberta politics. But did Doug Ford win because he's Doug Ford and he's the superpower political machine, or did he win because his opposition was so terrible, or is it a little bit of both? I mean, the voter turnout was only 43% of
Yeah.
Ontarians voted, and then the PCs got like 41% of that. But the opposition was just absolutely terrible. I mean, both the leaders of the Liberal Party and the NDP resigned right after they lost, and Stephen Del Duca didn't even win his seat.
He got
Um,
destroyed. Like, it wasn't even close. I think Michael Tobolo got more than 50% in that riding,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
and Del Duca held that riding. I can't remember if he resigned or if he ran for re-election in 2018 when the Doug Ford PCs first won their majority. Regardless, Tobolo won it in 2018, and he won it with a higher margin in in 2022.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, there were a lot of. It's interesting because some of the stuff from people, for more again from the social conservative perspective, don't like Doug Ford for various reasons. But a big part of this election and part of Alberta politics that just happened with Kenny's leadership is the COVID-19 policies, and it seems that those didn't play as much of a major role in in the Ontario provincial election, or did it? And he was just the lesser of three evils because I mean, like Stephen Del Duca wanted kids to be vaccinated in
I
order to
think,
go to
yeah, I
school.
think that was
So
like the first week of the campaign he announced that, and they announced it one
yeah,
day. I think they talked about it a little bit the second morning, and then it was never heard from again. They must have got
yeah,
some internal polling back pretty quick on that. People have moved on,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Here in Ontario. I'm very proud of this fact, and my wife thinks that I'm crazy for remembering this, but we live 5 minutes and 34 seconds away from Costco. And so that is where I am basically every Saturday getting my
Oh, Saturday? Oh,
yeah,
that's the
well,
worst
that
time.
I'm working hard, Alyssa, right? I'm working hard during the week. That's the only day I can go, and I'm there getting for sure getting my Polish bratwurst for $1.50. But anyway, so I remember so I do the grocery shopping, although that's changing a little bit because when we got back from Manitoba for Christmas, our baby girl was about 3 months old, maybe 4 months old, and it was just cold and it's windy, and it's just like, you know what, I'm not gonna bother bringing her out. We go to three or four different grocery stores to try to get the best price and everything and balance that with quality. It's a process. So I said to my wife, listen, I'll go out and do the grocery shopping on Saturdays. It's the only day I can do it because I don't shop on Sundays. Um, and I'm kind of glad I did because when the Doug Ford PCs announced that they were basically getting rid of restrictions provincially, more or less, at the I think end of February, beginning of March. When I first went to Costco, immediately like maybe half people were wearing their masks, and now you go 3 4 months after that, like no one's wearing their mask. People have moved on.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's a big reason why he won re-election because I think that he got rid of the provincial restrictions regarding COVID far away enough from election day that something like New Blue or Ontario Party wasn't going to eat as much into his vote as maybe the PPC did for Aaron O'Toole in September of 2021. And then on top of that, you have the NDP and the Liberals who wanted to go the other side, right? That the
yeah,
other side and more restrictions was not Doug's weakness, right? Doug's weakness was that he had too many restrictions, but I think he was far away enough from that was an issue, which, by the way, this is an issue for Roman Baber in the Conservative leadership race. The other
yeah,
thing too is that I think Ontario is different than Alberta. I know we're going to get to
yeah,
Alberta in a little bit, but I think the expectations generally from Conservatives is a little bit different for Doug than it is for Jason. That may be fair or unfair, but
for
it,
sure.
it is the way it is. So I think you have a confluence of things. I think you were far enough from the COVID restrictions. I think that you had weak opposition leaders or stale opposition leaders in the case of Andrea Horvath. I think you had generally people like Doug. Like there's a bounce for Doug, right? Like I don't agree with with a lot of Doug Ford's policies or sometimes lack thereof, especially on pro-life issues. I didn't vote PC in my riding. I voted for the Ontario Party candidate because he was the most winnable pro-life candidate. But I still like there's a likability about Doug that I find genuine, and that even for
Yeah,
me it attracts me to him. It's kind of like that all shucks backslapping. Like I don't mind that. I kind of like that in our politicians, to be frank. And so you had that factor. So I think it was a confluence of things that led to that. I'm not going to call it a super majority, but definitely strengthened majority for the progressive conservatives. One other thing that I think a lot of people don't talk about is our old friend Monty McNaughton. And him and his office for the past 4 years have worked so incredibly hard in reaching out to private sector unions. And I think this, as pro-lifers, I think this is a big opportunity for us, period, because I think a lot of these people that are in private sector unions, like they normally vote NDP, but for like all that woke crap, they're totally not into it, right? These are your lunch bucket, like denim, jean, local 378 guys. Like they want an extra $3 an hour, an extra week of vacation, and they want to go home and watch the Leafs not win a playoff round. They want to go watch the Jays or whatever. Like these are kind of like these are probably social conservatives. These are small C conservatives, and.
Totally.
And Monty McNaughton and his team for the past 4 years have reached out to them. That's why the PCs won Windsor West, and they cleaned up in Essex, and they won a seat in the North, and they won Hamilton East Stony Creek, my riding, and they were competitive in a bunch of other, like Brantford Brant was a bigger margin for Will Bauma. So it's an interesting shift as well, I think, in the party base that I think is indicative and is instructive not only for the federal Conservatives but other conservative parties in Canada provincially too.
And they did really well with New Canadians too. Like they won in a lot of those ethnic ridings, which is, I think, the unions and the ethnic ridings also made a huge difference.
They won all 6 in Brampton. Like I don't remember a time, and maybe you do, Alyssa, because you're from Ontario, but I don't remember a time when the Conservatives had every single seat in Brampton. Maybe they did under Harper in 2011. I could be wrong on that, but if that's the case, it's been a very long time.
Just as a total side note, I don't know if you were with me or not, but I remember volunteering for Kyle Seaback in Brampton. And
I did when I came in 2015. I did some door knocking with you.
And it was the Jays playoff game when Batista flicked the bat, and it was a hot summer's day, and we were door knocking down the road, and everybody's windows were open, and simultaneously the Jays game was on. Like every single person on that road was watching the Jays game, and I thought this is just totally useless to be door knocking because like very little people were coming to the door. But I do remember this one guy knocked on the door, and he came running as fast as he could, shirtless, and he's like, "What are you doing? The Jays are on," and then just left. Like he didn't even hear what I had to say.
So you mark that down and say, yes, that's a hard yes. And you know what's frustrating about that is that during that series, we want to talk about playoff series. During that series, there was one party that had a constant ad during that series, and that was the Liberals, and they bought it like 3 or 4 months in advance. And the Conservatives had it was like a 10-to-1 ratio. Like you would see 10 Liberal ads during those playoff games, and you'd maybe see 1 Conservative ad.
Oh. I did not know that.
Yeah, I don't know why, because back then, like the Conservative Party was pretty good at that stuff, right?
Yeah,
knowing like your market and everything like that, and they completely the bet on that one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, my husband says the Jays are going to take it this year, and we're both kind of in a deep depression because he's a Flames fan and I'm a Leafs fan. And
gotta grab onto something.
Exactly.
Well, they the other day they had an 8-game winning streak, and and they're now. Or they were the other day 17-9 at home, something like that. So like that there was a bit of a lull there, but I think they're finding their way back. Yeah.
And just as another side, I have to mention this. I don't know if you read this story, but I was doing a little bit of research before this podcast on Stephen Del Duca because I didn't know much about him. And the one thing that has stuck out in my mind above all else is that his riding association spent $50,000. They approved $50,000 in steakhouse bills, receipts. So if they held an event or party or dinner at a steakhouse, that riding association spent $50,000 of donor money on steakhouses, and they loved the keg. Like I have a huge craving for the keg now because it was like $5,000 at the keg. One bill was $14,000 at the keg. Like I can't even believe that.
So for all the people who are in our right now organization who want to volunteer, that is something that will never happen.
Yeah, we will never spend $50,000.
I think one time on the road, Alyssa and I went to the keg instead of Pita Pit or
we had
Tim's.
A gift certificate though.
And we had a gift certificate. Yeah. And we had a gift certificate.
Somebody gave
I think it was mostly spent on old fashions. I don't even know if we got the steak.
Yeah. But he loves the keg. Let's just leave it at that. Good old Del Duca.
Well, he has time to go. Now he's got the time to go. So good on him.
If you want to see him.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, one other thing we should mention about the Ontario provincial election is this is the second election in a row that the Liberal Party of Ontario has failed to get official party status.
Yeah, they just increased 1 seat, right?
Yeah, they just won the one. Yeah. Actually, like all things considered, like I was a little bit surprised that Andrea Horvath actually resigned. I mean, I am and
Well,
I'm
they
not.
lost like 800,000 votes. They lost like almost a million votes. The NDP.
The NDP, yeah, but they
Yeah.
did the seat count didn't go down by that much. Like everyone thought they'd do way worse. By the way, like, I think the Conservatives lost like 500,000. So it's like everyone lost
Yeah,
votes.
it was just a lower.
Yeah, everyone lost
Yeah.
votes. But yeah, like their percentage of the vote went down by
Yeah, they
almost.
lost 9 seats.
They lost 9 seats, and the percentage of vote went
Yeah.
about 10. But everyone thought that like the Liberals and the NDP were going to switch spots. Are the NDP going to get official party opposition? You know, Stephen Del Duca, even if it doesn't win his seat, you know, he's going to be leader of the opposition. And none of that stuff came to pass. Like they in the last week, and you could see some of the changes that were happening, like in their comms and the way they were, at least from the reports on the ground and like different like Twitter people that I follow, like you could see that they were shifting some of their focus and their volunteers, and I think they pulled it off, because I think, you know, 2 weeks before the vote, that easily could have been the case. They would win less than 10 seats, and the Liberals would win, you know, 30 plus. So I think they should hold their heads pretty high, because I think they did a lot better than a lot of people thought they would.
Yeah. On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com.
And be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
All right, so we just talked about Doug Ford and his win, his second majority in Ontario. And we'll go from Ontario to Alberta, where I have to say I'm a little bit heartbroken about this. Jason Kenney had a leadership review, and although he won, technically he won, he did resign as leader of the UCP. And you know, as someone who came to Alberta in 2018 to help out in the provincial election, I got to know various Conservatives, various MLAs, and Jason himself to a certain extent. And I do think that, you know, aside from social conservative issues, he was definitely one of the best conservative politicians we've had in Canada. And I think that he was very good for Alberta, and he had never lost an election. And this was a sad way to go out. So I hope for big things for him for the future. But yeah, he lost his leadership review, and in big part again back to the COVID-19 restrictions.
Technically
Like,
didn't
that was a
lose,
huge,
but like
yeah,
practically lost.
Yeah, in his mind it was a loss, but he did win. He got 51% of the vote, and 48% voted to can him. But with 51%, it just wasn't uniting the party the way that the United Conservatives should be, and so he did step down and resign. So various MLAs and others are launching their leadership bids right now, like Brian Jean, Danielle Smith, and Travis Toes, and probably others, some other MLAs as well. But I posted on social media this article by Sean Spear. If you haven't read it, you should check it out. It kind of explains perfectly what I think about the state of Alberta politics and why he was voted down. And I know that a lot of people, a lot of friends of mine, and a lot of you know, even pro-life supporters did not like Kenny. They didn't like that pastors were arrested in Alberta, and I totally get that. Like, I hated that too. I always spoke out against that, and I hated the restrictions. It's very difficult to go from saying, you know, it's the summer of fun and the summer of freedom to then turning around and locking down the entire province, like just as much as New Brunswick or Nova Scotia. Vax pass, everything, when he was adamant that wasn't going to happen. So I understand how it's hard to come back from that. But I will say, you know, we were just talking about Doug Ford, and opening up the province far away from the election, but all the other premiers followed in Jason Kenney's footsteps. If he hadn't kind of started this trend, who knows how long this would have gone on. You needed a leader in that department to take the first step, and Jason was always that leader. So despite things that I didn't like about restrictions here in Alberta, I do think that the country, it was better off with him, and he did try. He was the only premier to actually try to lift all the restrictions completely, and for various reasons in the hospitals and whatever, he thought it was best to implement them back and with even greater vigor. But I think that it will be definitely more difficult in the future without him in Alberta. But hopefully the next leader will kind of do the things that emulate the things that he did well, and leave the things that he didn't do well. And I'll definitely be involved, but I personally think that it's a bad thing for the province and a bad thing for the country, and I think that he will be missed.
Well, the other thing I should highlight too about that, it's a bad thing for social conservatives and for pro-lifers specifically. Like I agree with you, Alyssa. Like it was very frustrating to see him make the decisions that he did, the public policy decisions, knowing that that's not where the province was at. Like there was basically, if you looked at most polling, there was 45% that said he didn't go far enough. There was 45% that said he went too far, and there was 10% that said he's doing the right thing. And I'm sorry, but you just can't win with only 10% of the vote on like anything. And that's where he was stuck. The one thing I'll say about Jason is that he never followed polls, obviously, and he did what he believed, which is something we should all admire in politicians, whether we agree with them or not, within reason. That they do what they believe, and that they're consistent in that. And unfortunately, for Jason, like, he just didn't have his finger on the pulse for that. But that being said, for pro-lifers, that was someone that we had in office who was a really big ally for us. You look at the throne speech from a month or two ago, and there was actual pro-life policies discussed in there, things that if they become implemented would actually reduce the abortion and assisted suicide rates in Alberta. Are you going to have that under a new leader? Probably not under Danielle Smith, probably not under Brian Jean. So for pro-lifers in the United Conservative Party of Alberta who voted to get rid of Jason, thinking they want one of those two, like, give your head a real long shake, because there's a huge abortion and assisted suicide rate in Alberta that really does need to come down. We'll our organization is going to get involved. No, definitely. There will be pro-lifers, I'm sure, that will be involved in that leadership race, like running as candidates, and we have to make sure that we get them in there and continue to flex our muscles as we are starting to do at the nomination level too.
And this will be like an ongoing conversation because there will be another leadership race, obviously, over the next 6 months. But I just wanted to quickly mention it because I do think that him and Ford and other premiers, their successes go hand in hand. And he was a leader and a role model to a lot of politicians and got a lot of people involved. I mean, he recruited Leslie Lewis, so we wouldn't have her running for leader if it wasn't for Jason. So, I think that obviously we should be angry, but we shouldn't be a rage machine where we take down every single politician because of certain things and overlook all the other good things. We have to make conservatism, we have to make pro-life and social conservatism appealing to the average person. And if we're just going to be angry and like a rage machine all the time, we're never going to do that. So and with the case of Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, obviously, like, we just got someone 1,000 times worse. That was completely unworkable. So I hope that doesn't happen this time. And obviously
it can always get worse
to make sure,
right? If there's one lesson that can be learned by pro-lifers and
sure.
social conservatives, it can always get worse. I mean, we're always
and
working...
as Meatloaf said, you don't know what you got till it's gone. So
God rest his soul. Yeah. Like take Leslie Lewis, for example, right? Let's say she does win the conservative leadership race. Well, something's going to happen along the way that she says or does or doesn't say or doesn't do that's going to maybe anger you or anger you specifically, less, or anger me. But the thing is that there's no one that's perfect, right? Like, there's stuff that I do that pisses my wife off. Aaron tells me that there's lots of stuff that you do that pisses him off.
What?
So I know it's a shock. It's a shock, but this is the point. Like, it's like we can't look for...
That's Aaron, my husband, not Aaron O'Toole. Just
maybe both. maybe
Yeah,
both.
probably.
Maybe both.
Yeah.
But we can't always be looking for perfection, because if we look for perfection, we're not going to get anywhere. And I think that there's probably a good segue into probably the last thing we want to talk about on
Yeah.
this, our first podcast, being
Yeah.
the SCOTUS decision that's supposed to be coming down later this month.
Yeah. So there was obviously a leaked draft of Roe versus Wade, of overturning Roe versus Wade, that just blew up in the media, both in the States and in Canada even. And Justice Roberts confirmed that the document was authentic. I think they were supposed to have more decisions out today, or further comment on it today. I'm not sure if that happened yet or not. But yeah, it looks like that's probably going to happen, that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned. A lot of people misunderstand and think that if it's overturned, then abortion will be criminalized in the US, but that's not in fact what that means. It just means that the individual states will have more jurisdiction to implement laws, so it's not a federal thing, it's more of a state thing. But yeah, people are absolutely freaking out even today. Like a man, like some pro-abortion man, chained himself to the Supreme Court.
Sounds about right.
So, I mean, people are just going wild. And one of the most interesting things I remember reading is that a satanic temple in Massachusetts, I think, is going to challenge this decision because, I have to find it. They say that abortion should be permitted on religious grounds because they want to perform religious abortion rituals in states that have put up barriers to the medical procedure. So these are the types of people.
Good luck with that challenge.
Are
Actually, not
really
good luck.
mad about overturning Roe versus Wade. Yeah, it's going to be a huge decision. It's monumental in the States. It took them decades to do, so it wasn't an overnight thing.
Yeah,
Perhaps we'll have a ripple event.
Yeah, let's get into that. Like, because I want to Canadianize this a little bit. So,
Yeah.
For people out there, they really need to understand the difference between the United States and Canada when it comes to the law or lack thereof on abortion. So, in the United States, they had a Supreme Court decision, all by men, in 1973 that basically said you cannot restrict abortion. I think they said basically before 21 weeks or 12 weeks or something like that. Because in the United States, each state is responsible for criminal legislation. That's why you have different punishments in different states, for capital punishment and things of this nature. In Canada, the Criminal Code of Canada applies to all across Canada.
But there was Bertha Wilson, though. There was one woman.
No, you're thinking. I'm saying that in the United States, that Roe versus Wade decision was
yes,
all men. Yeah, it was all men.
Yeah.
In Canada, criminal legislation is federal, so the provinces are not responsible for it whatsoever. They can't determine different punishments or things of this nature. And the law that Pierre Trudeau brought in 1969. Basically said, okay, if you want an abortion, you have to go to what's called a therapeutic abortion committee, a TAC, at your hospital, 3 physicians, and you present your case, and the 3 physicians would decide, whether or not you would be granted an abortion. So, like in some places like downtown Toronto and downtown Montreal, there are basically rubber stamps. Like any reason you want, you got it. In a place like Prince Edward Island, there was no hospital that actually created any
clinic.
There was no hospital that actually agreed to create a therapeutic abortion committee, so it doesn't exist. So in 1988, in our Supreme Court decision in Morgentaler, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled like, okay, this law is federal jurisdiction, but doesn't apply the same federally, so it's unconstitutional based on that ground, which is actually probably not that bad of jurisprudence. And they said, okay, Parliament, we're striking down this law. You have to come up with a new law to regulate abortion, whether it be right from conception or you allow it all the way for 9 months or somewhere in between, whatever. You have to come up with some sort of solution. And most justices who wrote the 4 decisions, actually all 7 justices who wrote the 4 decisions, said that there should be some sort of legal protection for the preborn girls and boys in the womb. So it's different. It's a different legal structure, different legal situation. But another thing I want to talk about SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, and their decision that's probably going to be rendered later this month in June, is that this just didn't happen out of the blue. It didn't happen because, Donald Trump appointed 3 pro-life justices to the Supreme Court, which he did, but that didn't happen out of the blue. What happened was, starting in the 1980s with organizations like Operation Rescue and like 9 or 10 or whatever other organizations, they purposely started building lists. They started in the 1970s, not 1980s. So they started doing church presentations. They started doing community presentations. They went door knocking. They were building their lists of pro-lifers. And then once they had lists, they would compete in Democratic and Republican primaries. So that's like their version of nominations for different districts, for different senators, both federal and at state level, for governorships, for the presidency. They made sure that they could get pro-life students through law school, so they have justices, pro-life justices eventually, or lawyers to appoint to the bench to make into pro-life justices. Like this took many, many decades, and I can guarantee you that along the way, that both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party pushed back against them and used corrupt means to deny them primaries, to deny them certain staffing positions, to deny them certain policies. But the thing is that the American pro-lifers weren't throwing up their hands and be like, oh, there's corruption in these parties that already exist for hundreds of years before we started to get involved in them. Ergo, we're going to start a new third party. That never happened. That seems to be a case in Canada. And for example, if you look at the Ontario provincial election and you look at the 200,000 plus people who voted for the Ontario and New Blue parties, if every single one of those people in all those ridings voted to take over those progressive conservative EDA boards, riding boards, pro-lifers would control the party, assuming most of those people are pro-life who voted for those parties. Pro-lifers would control the Progressive Conservative Party. And every time that, the Progressive Conservative Party or the United Conservative Party of Alberta or the Saskatchewan Party or the Federal Conservative Party, disqualify a candidate for spurious reasons who are pro-life or do that type of stuff, that's a badge of honor, because they're not doing that stuff, out of the blue. They're doing that stuff because that's the only card they have left to play. And eventually we're going to take that card away from them, but we're not going to take that card away from them if we just like say, oh, this candidate isn't perfect because of this one thing, or like, oh, I came up against a wall and now I'm just going to walk away from the challenge completely. Like, we're like, if you want to get to our version of what's about to happen later this month with SCOTUS regarding Morgentaler, this is a lesson for pro-lifers, is that you got to keep pushing through, and it's not going to happen in the next 5 years or even 10 years. Like, this is a long-term process. So that's why I find very interesting about the SCOTUS decision.
And what's interesting too is about what you're saying, getting involved, is that like under President Obama, the pro-life movement was able to pass over 200 pieces of state-by-state legislation.
Over 400.
Over 400.
Yeah.
So probably, between the two terms. So, so it's, getting involved at the smaller scale level and even at the state level, or here in Canada at the provincial level, can make a huge difference. Like Scott said, provincially, instead of continuously starting new parties and trying to split the vote that way and potentially even having a worse Liberal leader, and let's actually take over and get our people in so that, we can pass laws that do reflect public opinion and reflect ourselves. So it doesn't have to be this federal thing. We don't have to be under the auspices of Justin Trudeau forever, who just wants abortion in every city and every town and every corner.
Or Pierre Poilievre, for that matter. Because they have the exact same abortion policy. FYI.
Or Charest and Baber and everybody. Yeah, they all have the exact same policy as Trudeau, except for Lewis. So,
except for the female black immigrant lawyer that's running in the leadership race. Yeah.
Yeah. But we don't hear about the old white men argument when it comes to the Conservatives. But listen to the woman who actually had the experience, the potential abortion experience, and then let me know what you have to say about the issue.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that in a federal election between her and Justin Trudeau.
Oh my goodness, amazing. Yeah, like people think that it's like, just because Pierre can repeat himself or kind of like bully to a certain extent in the House of Commons doesn't mean that he is the only one who is able to confront Trudeau and actually defeat him and put him on the spot, or make him look bad. For instance, like Leslin can do it just as well as anybody else, and
better. You think in a 36-day election campaign that the media and the other opposition parties are going to let Pierre Poilievre and his team get away with talking about inflation for 36 days? Like, that's not going to happen, even no how badly they want it. So, if you want Pierre Poilievre to talk about inflation for a good portion of a 36-day election campaign, elect Dr. Leslyn Lewis as party leader, who will shut down that abortion debate. You want to talk about shutting down the abortion debate? She'll shut down that debate because no one's going to want to debate her on it. And then you have all the room for, finance critic Pierre Poilievre to talk about his pet issues. That's the way to do it.
Well, on that note, I'm sure we'll be talking more about this in future. The conservative leadership will be determined in September, so we have a lot more podcasting to do before then. So we're just gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Okay, so we're back, and we're just going to end our first ever podcast with a segment we like to call Things We Like and Things We Hate. And I know other podcasts do this, so we're sort of ripping it off, but it's always fun to listen to. And Scott, I'll let you go first. What are the two things from, this past month or this past week? Something that you like and something that you hate.
Okay, so I'll start with something that I like. And something I like is that, Alyssa, you mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, the deadline to sign up to be a member of the Conservative Party of Canada, eligible to vote in leadership race, was on Friday, June 3rd. And working with some volunteers from For My Canada, which is an organization that we like to work with from time to time, and our Right Now volunteers, we were able to sell almost 1,000 memberships in 24 hours working the phones. So I love our volunteers. And I love when our volunteers actually come out and volunteer and put in a few hours, because it does make a really big difference. So that might be a little bit corny for our first podcast, but I'm going to put that out there. Now,
okay, I'm just going to interrupt because I did have a volunteer message me as she was doing calls. And she said, if anyone asks me who the overly friendly lady was making cold calls, you'll know who they mean. And she sent me a picture of her holding, it's like peach spritzer. So thank you to that volunteer who was overly friendly and drinking what I will probably buy after this podcast, a delicious peach spritzer.
Awesome. Okay, so good for that volunteer, by the way. Have some fun with it, right? Yeah. Why not, right?
You're in your own home.
Yeah, exactly. It's a Friday evening. Yeah. So okay, and things I hate. Yeah. So this is something that I just been driving me up a wall for like the past month. So the Winnipeg Jets didn't make the playoffs this year, and everyone in Winnipeg land and Manitoba, in like different podcasts and different sports shows, are talking about like, oh, we need to ship Mark Scheifele out of here. He's been here for 10 years and he has such a bad attitude, and he sucked this year, and he's not worth the money, and we need to trade him while we have a team-friendly contract to get some people back. And I'm just like, okay, like let's just pump the brakes a little bit here, because Scheifele is a point per game player, and he's been a point per game player for 6 straight seasons. There are only 2 other players currently in the NHL that have a longer season streak of being a point per game player. Can you guess who those 2 are, Alyssa?
Matthews, McDavid.
Neither. It is Crosby and Ovechkin. So like part of having a championship team, sorry Oilers, sorry Leafs, is having a point per game player for multiple seasons, which Mark Scheifele is. Jets don't have a head coach. They're looking to get a new head coach. It sounds like it's between Vegas and Winnipeg for Barry Trotz, who has won a Stanley Cup, is originally from Manitoba, Dauphin, which is just north of my hometown of Brandon. Would be a great place for him to come back to, coach his last 4 years of professional coaching in the NHL, maybe move into management. He's very, very defensive minded. And if there's one legitimate criticism about Mark Scheifele, he was a minus 17 player this year, is that his defensive game sucks. Granted, Winnipeg's defensive system sucks, so that kind of makes sense. So I don't understand why people in Winnipeg and in Manitoba sports shows don't talk about, like, why not bring in Barry Trotz to coach a Mark Scheifele for the next year or two so we can get a more well-rounded 200-foot-a-game player. That is something that just drives me up the wall. I hate it, and I hate it with passion. So what are yours?
Okay. But very passionate. Hopefully you get what you want there. The things I liked this week, okay, the top thing I liked was watching Top Gun. Have you seen it yet?
I haven't seen it yet. No, I heard it's every bit as good as most people want it to be. Is that true?
Yeah, it's exactly what a sequel should be. There's nothing woke about it. Like, there was not even one single thing. I don't know about you, but like even going to the Avengers movies or even kids movies like Buzz Lightyear or whatever, there's always something. There's like one thing that they have to like just screw you with in there, and it just pisses you off. And Top Gun was not like that. There were American flags waving. There's Tom Cruise on his motorcycle.
Did he age in it at all, or does he still look the same from 1986?
Well, it's interesting because before the movie, you know how actors are like, "Thank you for coming to the show. We couldn't make this without you." Like, they do a little intro.
Right.
When Tom Cruise did his intro, he looked old, but then in the movie, he looked just like he did 30 years ago.
Was there a volleyball scene?
So. There totally was a volleyball scene with the best One Republic song. It's now on my workout. It's now on my workout list, and just it's a lot of jacked men right there. But it was good times, and that's not the only reason why I liked it. It was just
sure.
It was just a great movie from beginning to end. It was exciting, and so if you haven't seen it and you hate woke stuff just as much as I do, then check it out. When one of the things that I hate this week is, well, not just this week, but in life, are the freaking vaccine mandates for travel, province to province, because my mom is here. I gave birth to my son 3 weeks ago, and she came here for the birth, and the hoops that she has had to jump through just to travel to visit her daughter in another province is insane. And I'm so glad that, like, the WestJet CEO and just the WestJet in general, and then just today there was like a former NHL player who was stuck at Toronto Pearson for like 3 days, and all his flights got canceled. On the Twitter videos going viral, but there's so much call to action for Trudeau to cancel these mandates, and especially from the Conservative Party, Melissa Lantsman and others who are constantly calling him out.
You mean that vote that Pierre Poilievre missed?
You're like the Patrick Brown of this podcast, just relentless against Polyev.
I didn't miss the vote. I'm just saying he missed the vote.
He did miss it.
Leslie Lewis and Scott Aitchison, who are also traveling, didn't miss the vote.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he missed it, and if he in fact wins, which I honestly hope he doesn't win, I want Leslie to win, but if he does, that better be like the first thing that he does.
He did introduce a private member's bill on Thursday about it, to be fair to him. See, I can be balanced.
But it's just astronomical. It's just crazy that, like, we can't get on a plane and travel to a different province within our own country.
I think we're the only country where that's the case.
Absolutely. It's like, yeah, what other countries prevent travel? Like China, North Korea?
Well,
honestly.
Yeah. Those are the countries that Justin Trudeau looks up to. There are countries out there that are getting rid of their vaccine mandates for period, like to enter the country, to work in healthcare, it's just gone. It's just normal.
Yeah.
Because it is normal.
Well, yeah, the police force is bringing back all their unvaccinated. The paramedics here are bringing back all their unvaccinated. Like, it's absolutely insane that Trudeau is sticking with this mandate and is being relentless about it. And I think and I hope that it will be his downfall, because he's obsessed, just as obsessed with vaccine mandates as he is with abortion. And that's saying a lot, because the guy is nuts about killing babies. So on that note, we will be releasing our podcast every week. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. We'll be releasing it on Rumble, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, anywhere, basically major places where you get your podcasts or you listen. You can watch it or listen. Let us know what you think, whether it's positive or negative. We love to read that hate mail. So you can write to us at info@itstartsrightnow.ca, and we will pour through it in the nights when our babies are crying, and we're consoling them, reading through all your comments, good or bad. So make sure you let us know what you think. And, this was our first one. We'll get more polished. We'll have guests. We'll have different topics that we talk about. So let us know what you think. And good job, Scott.
Thank you. You
high
as well as
five.
Alyssa. Thanks for hosting.
And we'll talk to you guys all next week. See you then.